life at the moment. It's not easy for many of us, is it? And just as we're starting to get back on our feet after the whole lockdown, the disruption and all the rest of it, there's some more disruption on its way, potentially. The Rail, Maritime and Transport Union has announced plans for what is being called, I quote, the biggest rail strike in modern history. This is amid an ongoing dispute about jobs and pay. More than 40,000 railway workers are going to vote on whether to take strike action, which could begin as early as June. The RMT said Network Rail intends to cut at least 2,500 maintenance jobs as part of a £2 billion reduction in spending across the network. Rail workers, by the way, average a salary of £40,000 annual, which is, of course, above the average salary across the UK. Now, panel, where do we sit on this? I don't want anyone to be unfairly kind of impacted at the moment. The cost of everything is going up, and everyone naturally, understandably, by the way, wants their pay to follow suit and match rates of inflation, which, by the way, they're off the Richter scale at the moment. Is that realistic, Marianne? Are the unions right in what they're doing? Should we be supporting this strike action? Your thoughts?
I think there's two aspects. One is what the RMT have said is a safety issue, because if you're cutting 2,500 jobs that are linked to safety on the railways, then what is the potential impact? Are all those people, are all those roles genuinely superfluous, or is there going to be a knock-on impact on the safety of the railways? For passengers, I go on the railway, my loved ones go on the railway, you guys use trains. We need a public transport system that works, that is fit for purpose, that is future-proofed. And so I think it's really easy, isn't it, to assume that the trades unions just want to cause trouble in order to justify their existence. Some people do that. They kind of go, well, actually, you know, they always like striking. Gives them something to do. They don't want to work with the employers. They want to cause trouble. But I think that's just a really wrong-headed way of looking at it. And a point where lots of people, lots of your viewers will be sitting at home going, I feel quite helpless about this cost of living crisis. I don't necessarily feel like my elected politicians are taking it seriously. I mean, we saw how little Rishi Sunak did for people in the spring statement. This is one of the ways that we actually have control and power and a voice as people, as employees. And so I think we probably do need to get behind the unions and say, you know, when you do a poll of your members, do it properly, do it seriously, be at those negotiating tables with a sort of a true heart, you know, go into it open-minded and trying to find resolution, because that is ultimately in everybody's best interest, including members, including people who work on the railways. But ultimately, striking is the peaceful, democratic way of saying this is not OK, this is not in our name. It's not acceptable. Is it acceptable, all some of the goings-on, Andre?
Well, let me tell you this. The chap on the London Underground who says, all change Waterloo, all change, on the microphone earns £38,000 a year. I think most people watching this would say shouting all change Waterloo is not a particularly difficult job and doesn't require a great deal of training.
He probably does more than that, to be fair.
Well, OK, fine. But and perhaps,
also, if there were a fire, he's on the front line.
And perhaps I'm being slightly disparaging, but I think the clear point is these salaries are absolutely vast. So if I take the West Coast Main Line on a regular basis, what we used to call Virgin Trains, you know, your average driver is going to be on the thick end of £100,000. Now, once again, it's not a particularly, in my view, difficult job to do. You don't have to train like you have to do to be a lawyer or a doctor. Look, the critical point is this. We, in recent years, have improved...
Sorry, it's only just sunk into my head there. Did you just say the average train driver is on £100,000?
The thick end of £100,000 on the West Coast Main Line, yes, they are. It's £70,000 basic plus overtime. You will get the thick end of £100,000 a year.
Right, viewers, you know what to do. Down tools, get your job applications in.
That would be very difficult to do because the union controls the recruitment in a way that's very similar to what used to happen in the United States of America with the closed shop and what happened in Britain in the 1970s. I'll tell you one thing that's really important to bear in mind. Since changes were made to the railways, I don't call it privatisation because it's not full privatisation. The Department for Transport is still largely in charge. The level of safety has improved in the United Kingdom. We had, I think in 2002, the first year ever ever that nobody died on the railways since their inception. And that is a step forward. And I'll tell you why. Because actually the reality is, what we just heard from you is an assumption that just because you have lots and lots of people earning lots and lots of money, safety improves. The reality is, actually, you need to be much more razor-sharp and much more focused. And I don't think the trade unions are supportive of that. I think the trade unions are supportive of a closed shop that costs us a fortune. And by the way, listen, if people don't believe me on the figures for what these people earn, you're perfectly welcome to go and check it out. It is a bonanza.
It's not that I don't believe you. I think it's quite... I might be tempted to apply myself. I can do those announcements. All change, water... No, they don't get 100, do they?
No, they're not quite on that much now.
Right. Well, Northern accents, all change. Anyway, Lee, what do you think to all this? Unions, are they doing a good job in this?
So I think there's two different issues, as Mary-Anne says. There's the safety issue, and it's actually completely wrong to suggest that safety has improved since privatisation. I just went this afternoon on the Office for the Rail Regulator to check. So since 2003 to 2020, deaths on the railway have increased 15%, injuries are up 10%. So when the RMT says there are safety issues, they're not wrong about that. Then there's the broader issue about pay, employment and so on. Lots of people love to hate the RMT, but what the RMT demonstrates over and over again is that strong union density in the workplace, having lots of people be a member of the union, which is not the same as a closed shop. Closed shop was abolished many years ago, but having lots of people in the union and then being willing to take industrial action, that's what defends pay and conditions and employment. So you look at what the railway workers are earning, and yeah, it's a lot of money, and I'm sure that a lot of people would like to be on that kind of money. What's the difference between them and the RMT? The RMT are unionised and they're willing to use their democratic power to fight for the conditions of their members.
The difference is an ability to bully people by shutting down the country. I'll tell you what we need to do. We need to change the law so that in your industrial dispute, if what you're arguing about, as in a small pay rise, is grossly disproportionate to the damage that's done to the economy, you should pay the bill. I think the RMT should be allowed to go on strike all day as long as I can get a taxi and expense it to the RMT. Let's level the playing field a little bit, because the reality is the government has an unlimited budget. Travellers are forced into travelling, forced into buying tickets, forced onto the railways. That's why they're doing so well, because they're actually just bullying the public. I think these guys, let me tell you something else. What was it when the Olympics came along and we were threatened with a tube strike during the Olympics, unless there was a £1,000 bonus given to drivers to do their own job during the Olympics? What an absolute disgrace. Oh, and by the way, lest we forget the strikes that took place during 40 years ago when we were preparing for the Falklands. These people are interested in bullying the British taxpayer, bullying the British motorist, bullying the British rail traveller in order to make off like a bandit.
I just find it baffling that you say these people. These people are taxpayers. They're people who have jobs and families and mortgages and gas bills. They're not different from the person who works in Sainsbury's or the person who works in a
if you earn 100,000 a year, you're different to somebody who works in Sainsbury's, believe me.
I don't earn 100 grand a year, and I think that I don't know. I can't counter it with kind of evidence to suggest that it does sound like quite a lot to me. The truth is, I think, for once, it doesn't happen often. But I agree with you, Lee. Yeah, I think we are in this really weird time in history where people who would otherwise be a voice of the people are actually against the union. And that is just really odd to me, because a union is a way to protect your rights as a taxpayer, as a normal working person in our country.
The biggest rail strike in history is not protecting the taxpayer, let's just be clear. Lee. It's an absolute financial disaster.
Lee?
Deliberate.
We should be clear that real pay is falling over 7% this year. So that's a massive cost of living crisis for millions of ordinary people. And the question is, what do you do about that? Do you just accept that, which for many people means penury, it means eating less, it means not being able to heat their homes, or do you fight back? And what are the mechanisms that working people have to fight back? We have political parties that don't represent ordinary working-class people anymore. Neither the Tories nor the so-called Labour Party represent the working poor anymore. And frankly, most of the unions don't either. The RMT stands out by being the militant one that actually fights for its members, and the results are there to be seen. They have safer employment, they have better terms and conditions, they have better pay. So the answer to all this is to join a union and make it fight for your own purposes.
But let me play devil's advocate with you, Lee, because you talk about real terms, pay cut, and no one's going to dispute that. That is the case for many, many people in this country at the moment. The prices, they've not stopped, by the way. Inflation is not just going to stop there. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. This cost of living crisis, we'll be talking in a minute about what's going on in China, because you're going to see even more supply disruption, probably more price increases the longer all this stuff goes on. So to your point, your central point there you just made about people essentially getting a real-term wage cut. The devil's advocate in all of this is if we follow kind of your logic, which is it's a terrible thing, let's raise everyone's wages. The flip side of that is, let's just pick train drivers as the example, because this is what we're currently talking about. So let's raise these train drivers' wages more in line with inflation. What that then will mean is a knock-on effect onto train prices, travel prices, which will mean that the cost of living will get worse. Because the ordinary people now that don't work on a train but want to use a train, it's going to cost them far more to use a train. So now they're going to need even more pay rises to keep up with this cost of the train fare. And around and around and around and around you go. So we have to somewhere get some kind of happy medium. And I personally think, and it's an awful thing to kind of have to comprehend, but I do think actually that it's unrealistic that that benefits are going to be able to keep up with inflation.
So who's taking the extra money from the inflation then?
Well, it'll be the train companies. And I actually think...
So let's just say if a shop is putting up its prices by 10% or a bar or a train company or whatever, if that money's not going to workers in the form of higher pay, which it isn't because we've got a 7% real terms pay cut, where's the money going?
Sorry,
we're talking about if a worker, let's just say a worker is on whatever now and gets that 10% pay rise. So they get what I'm saying to you, they get what you want.
I understood the logic of your point.
The consumer will be paying that.
I understood the logic of your point. But the point is if prices are going up, but that money is not going to deliver inflation-busting pay rises.
But it would be. That's the point.
Where is that?
What you've just said is wholly irrelevant. What Michelle said, and I think you understood her perfectly well, is if everybody's pay goes up in the railways, the price of the tickets will go up, and that will make the cost of living crisis worse.
The price of the ticket,
look, your point about more general inflation, I mean, the obvious answer to that is it's because we're heavily reliant on foreign oil, we're heavily reliant on ludicrous net zero green technologies, and there's a war in the bread basket of Europe. But that's not what we're talking about.
Pause on that for a minute.
But hang on, because these two are very bright people, so they got my point. So I'm obviously missing
he was just trying to argue it backwards. Sorry, Lee, you were.
Was you,
basically...
Lee? Get out.
Basically, that money goes to the shareholders or to the private owners of that train company. It doesn't stay in the loop. It gets siphoned off by people who probably can afford to, pay their mortgages and eat 3 square meals a day and send their kids on holiday. So it's not that it stays because it's not a public service.
It's not actually the way the rails are financed.
Stay within.
It's not the way...
it's a political choice that we have a privatised public services that mean that money is siphoned off to shareholders or to directors.
Which would be fine.
We have it with water, we have it with energy companies, we have it with public transport. And it's a political and economic decision that we've all, some of us have sleptwalked into, and I think others have manipulated and planned and gamed the system so that we all think that that's just how it should be. And it isn't. There is a different way of running our economy. There is a different way of running our society that actually rewards the people who work the hardest. And it isn't the politicians, and it isn't those boards of directors. It's the people who run care homes and nursery centres and drive buses.
So you would have, for example, train services fully nationalised? So non-profit, nationalised, the government... You'd have the government running train services?
I would
fully running?
No, probably not, because then you introduce inefficiencies and you have an alternative set of problems and management issues that we have to decide as a society, as a set of political classes making policy decisions and funding decisions. So you kind of swap one set of issues for another one. But I certainly don't think that the system we have now is fair. I don't think it works for people who are watching TV now going... actually, we're not going anywhere this summer, or actually, we haven't got any money at the end of this week, I'm going to have to take out a loan until the next payday. Well, that is the reality for people in this country right now. That is not OK.
Let me open this to you at home, because, you know, I get it. None of us want to be out of pocket. None of us want to see our wages essentially going backwards when everything cost-wise is going up. But let me ask you this, you know, who does pay for these pay rises? Not just on rail, let's just broaden it out, because this is affecting everyone everywhere. Every single person is going to be feeling this squeeze right now in their wages. Everyone is going to be saying, well, actually, I want a pay rise. Who?
Not the fat cats, not those folk who are earning not 100 grand for driving a train, but 900 grand plus share bonuses and benefits and pensions packages.
I do think, and I mean, I've voiced this opinion multiple times, I am a capitalist at heart, but I'm a responsible capitalist, and I do find it fascinating, because I personally think it would be such a stroke of PR genius, and I won't be so cynical as to suggest that many companies do whatever looks good PR-wise, but I am surprised, actually, that more companies... in fact, I'm surprised that none of them, actually, not a single one that I know of anyway, have actually come out and said, guys, you know what, we want your custom, we value your custom, so let's be in this together. So for the next 6 months, we're going to reduce our profit margins by, I don't know, X%. I think whichever company
Why are you surprised by that?
Because I think...
The purpose of a company is to maximise the profits that it delivers to its shareholders. That is the purpose of a company under capitalism.
I don't...
The point I was trying to make earlier on was this: that
do it very briefly, though. When you take a break as well.
When you've paid for all the costs that is needed to produce a good or service, then you've got a question about what happens to the margin between the cost and the price. That's going to be divvied up between profits for shareholders or the owners of the company and wages. And what we've seen in this country over the course of decades is the share going to workers in the form of wages has collapsed over time, when the proportion going to shareholders has increased. So when we're in a moment of inflation, the question is who's going to pay for this inflationary crisis? Is it going to be workers or shareholders? It shouldn't be workers.
Agreed.
Well, let me know your thoughts. And the reason, by the way, I'm surprised that companies haven't come out and made a suggestion to limit or not limit, but restrict their profits in the short term, is because ultimately, yes, of course, all businesses need to create profit for their shareholders, for their owners, whoever that might be. But ultimately, if a customer literally cannot afford your product or service, they will not purchase it. So for me, it's just basics. I would want to retain the customers I've had. In fact, actually, I'd like to get some more by being the most competitively priced product or service in the market. So therefore, if I had, say, an energy company or whatever, I would announce a profit. I'd explain it to my shareholders. It's an interim measure to retain customers and actually get some new ones. And in the long term, we'll see even more profits. That's what I would say.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.